Paltrocast.
Barrett, I'm going to say good afternoon, or is it good morning because you're on the west side of the country?
It's good morning. I'm in my hotel room in Hot Springs, California.
There's worse places to be.
Exactly.
It's a pretty overwhelming tour schedule that you got because you have to be on your game for the actual performance. You have to do press. You're talking up a book. You're talking up music, etc. So thank you for taking the time. And let's talk about the book, not your first book. So when I ask a lot of people, how long did it take you to write the book? And if they're like 42, they go 42 years. In your case, how long did it take you to write this book?
I wrote this Screaming Trees book in about, a couple of years, working on it off and on. Technically, okay, so it's my fourth book.
Right.
And I started writing the stories for the book back in about 2015, because I was working on my first book about music around the world. And of course, I had to write about Seattle and all the bands I'd played with and that whole music scene. And as I was writing the stories, they kept going and going. And I'd write a story and I'd be like, oh, yeah, that reminded me of this. And then I realized, man, I've written, half a book of stories about the Screaming Trees, and I can't put them all in this one book about music around the world. So I just kind of tabled them. And then when Mark Lanigan was writing his book, Sing
Yes.
Backwards and Weep, he would call me, and we've stayed friends this whole time. In fact, we were working on projects together right before he passed away. And he would call me and say, like, do you remember this particular event? What do you remember about that? And I'd tell him, and then he'd be like, God, that's not what I remember. Do you remember this? And I wouldn't remember that. And we would just laugh like hyenas, like we have post rock and roll dementia and we can't remember.
Not as bad as, say, Motley Crue, where The Dirt has so many inaccurate things about their history, and then each of their memoirs have different recollections of the same things, again, wrong. So I would say you at your worst is probably still better than Motley Crue.
Well, I will say this, Lanigan's book is actually really good and very accurate.
Yes.
I mean, there are a few minor things like, oh, we had a different tour manager on that tour, but it all blurs together anyway. And I had my book read and checked by, like Gary Lee Conner, who was also in the Screaming Trees. He's the founder, the guitar player. He loved it. He thought it was very accurate. Our old manager read it. Our tour manager read it. A bunch of musicians that we played with, like Duff McKagan and Mike McCready and Peter Buck, they all read parts of it. So that, I got feedback from everybody as to how the stories, but to be honest, the stories were written to be like little short comedic slices of what it was like to be in the Screaming Trees. It's not the kind of book that Mark wrote. And Mark encouraged me to write the more humorous side, because that's more my personality anyway. And so I tried to write it like, here's what happened. This is a true event that happened, but here's a more humorous way to look at the situation.
A notable thing that you just stepped over right there is you said Peter Buck, Duff McKagan, Mike McCready. You mean three guys that you were in super groups with outside of the Screaming Trees, outside of your master's degree, aside from the films you scored, aside from the books you've written. So you've always been a go-getter. Now, does that come out of not wanting to be bored and boring? Or is it just somebody offers you something, you say yes, and you don't realize that you also had another 10 things going on?
I'll say yes to just about any invite. I'm realistic about, like, can I actually do that in my schedule? But I've always had that. It's kind of like the Jim Carrey movie, Yes Man, where he says yes to absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And so, but when you do that, you end up having this incredible adventure. Like this last summer, I got asked to be on a sailing team with these Green Berets that have a sailing team. And we did the race to Alaska, where we literally sailed from Washington to Alaska in a 34-foot sailboat, and you couldn't have an engine in it. You could only sail or row. We thought it would take us, 5 days or a week. And it took us a month. And it was an incredible experience. I mean, just magical. And I became like kind of best friends with these guys. And they invited me to join their sailing team. And if I hadn't said yes to that, I would have never had that experience. I would have just probably stayed home all summer, and I would have done something. But you
You
got
would
to
have
say,
something.
say yes to life. You got to do it.
Now, you mentioned before this is a more humorous book than Mark's book.
Yeah.
And something that I'm finding is the more serious the band from Seattle or related to Seattle, the more serious their music was, the funnier they were. So, for example, when you talk to Kevin Martin from Candlebox, he can't be serious for more than 15 seconds. Big smile on his face.
Yeah.
I'm finding it might have been a marketing thing to make Seattle this gloomy place when in reality it's the comedy mecca of music.
You might be right about that. I mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, I know the Mudhoney guys. They are like
Mark is hilarious.
Yeah, he is a quick wit, man. He's fast. Like you can't hardly keep up with him. And Kim Thile is an old friend of mine. He's super funny. I don't know every musician in every band, but I would say like, the smartest ones are the funniest ones. I mean, that's just the truth. I also think that, humor is a way to show, well, like what they say, tragedy or humor is tragedy plus time, right?
Yeah.
So obviously there's a lot of tragedy in Seattle, all the people we lost to overdoses and just untimely death. And that's not funny. However, you can tell stories about those people and you can find a funny way. And I don't know, I think it touches people's hearts in a different way. If you're just like serious all the time and everything is this, hard, pragmatic, that's not that fun. That's not a book I'd really want to read,
Probably.
And you can, my book has some, kind of hard topics, because those are things that happened in the Screaming Trees. And,
right.
But you can talk about them if you set it up, you've created a platform of levity.
Right. Well, Screaming Trees, my exposure to the band was being a big MTV person. 120 Minutes. I think you were a Buzz Clip band.
Yeah, we had a Buzz Clip, and we also did a whole bunch of we did that MTV Alternative Nation tour, which was actually kind of grueling and wasn't very alternative.
Yeah, MTV was super low budget until maybe Total Request Live, that era. So where I was going with that is in that era, or a couple of years after the Buzz Clip stuff, I remember you did the Oasis tour with the Manic Street Preachers where you were playing Sheds and all that. So it's been interesting to see how you went from kind of indie band to the next big thing, MTV band, to it didn't work out, but we're still legendary. And now you fast forward that time, and probably if there were a Screaming Trees show tomorrow, it would be to the biggest crowds you've ever played. It's that kind of thing where MTV was not the peak in terms of your influence. So when did you kind of start to notice that, like, hey, we're a legacy band for the rest of my life. This is great, as opposed to I used to be in the Screaming Trees?
Well, there is a chapter in my book called Reunion. And in 2015, that's exactly what happened, what you just described. The Screaming Trees are considered this legacy band. In fact, we've been moved from our old label to Sony Legacy Recordings, which is where they put Miles Davis and Bob Dylan and, like
even Alice in Chains is there too. Yeah.
Oh, they're on there too. Good. They should be, because we were both Sony bands at the same time. And what happens is, so we got some offers to play festivals I think the offers came in 2015 and the shows would have been in 2016. And it was huge amounts of money, and like way more than we ever could have imagined. And Mark and I talked about this, and we were like, do we want to do this? And, maybe, let's, anyway, this for the better part of a year, we talked about doing it, and we fielded offers, and our booking agent said people all over the world were putting offers in to have us play festivals. And, but when we really thought about it, we thought, well, every band that we know is doing that and getting back together and, going out and making huge amounts of money. And even though the Trees were never at that level back in the day, we did have this big influence as songwriters. Like, I think that's what we're known for. We're like songwriters, album makers, and that was our legacy. And we all just kind of thought maybe we should leave it at that, because at that point, we'd all gone on to do such different things that it wouldn't, it would be kind of stepping backwards to do that. So we ended up not, taking any of those offers, and we decided not to do the legacy band thing. And I think that's to maybe more to our ongoing legacy that we didn't do that, because then it just allows people to remember those albums and those shows they saw when they were 22 years old or whatever.
Yeah, I think we've seen the same trajectory with every band that had a hit between, say, 92 and 99, where they regroup, they make more money than they ever did on that usually festival or bigger than they were run of theaters or something like that.
That's
exactly. And everyone's like, this is great, we're back. They make the reunion album. The next tour, the attendance is a little lower and the reviews weren't so great on that album. And the next tour, it's a little lower. And then they go, wait, are we weekend warriors like Warrant and Firehouse?
Right.
Or do we want to do the half legacy thing, or is this over? So then they end it, and then they come back again 5 years later for the 35th anniversary or the 40th anniversary. So I still say, hey, you could do it in some form if you wanted, but for the credibility, punk rock sake, you did the right thing.
I think so. I mean, we came up as punk rockers that, just happened to get, a big record deal and everything that happens after that. But I agree. I think sometimes it's just classier and cooler. But people have to, they have to live the life they want to live. They have to pay their bills. And, sometimes that's their only option, to do that. But in our case, Mark had a successful solo career. I was producing albums and working on projects all over the world. Van and Lee married and had families and had, kind of young kids, it's like they had their own lives, it just wasn't in the cards for us to do that.
So in terms of being the early punk rock band, most people I talk to of a certain age were into Kiss and Van Halen, and then they got into punk rock. Are you cut from that cloth too?
No, I'm the completely different cloth. I was totally into jazz, and my first record collection was my grandparents' collection of 78s of old big band and swing. So, and I played jazz all through, junior high and high school, and I got a scholarship to college and played jazz in college. And I was into, I would say, indie rock, like more than punk. It's not like I was a hardcore punk guy, but like I loved all the SST stuff and all the independent stuff that was coming out. And of course, I had this great aunt who was a record collector, and so she'd give me records, but they were classic records. So the first batch of records she gave me was Elton John, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, The Who, Tommy, Rolling Stones, Let It Bleed, Bob Dylan, Blood on the Tracks. It was like classic records. So, and of course I love Van Halen, like how can you not love Van Halen? They're awesome. But that's not an early influence on me. It was really jazz and just independent music in general. That
jazz to punk rock thing, the records that you mentioned actually happened to Jim Ward from At the Drive-In in Sparta too.
Oh, really? Well, At the Drive-In is an amazing band, so that's pretty cool if that was his influence too.
A few people that happened with where they were way too young to be into swing music, but they inherited somebody's record collection and they learned too many chords, and then eventually they simplified with punk rock. So cool to hear that's you.
That's funny you'd say that, because I'm a drummer, songwriter, composer, and I'd come up and people would be like, what is that chord progression that you've come up with? And it's because of that jazz, big band influence. Totally.
Wow. Okay. Before I let you on your way, two quick questions, and I'll let you go. And the first one is, the book is new to us. I know as a person who wrote a book that I turned in a year and a half ago, and it's not out for another 2 months. It's an old project for you. And this tour was booked months ago. Do you know what's coming up next for you in 2024? Do we just have to wait and see and keep checking Instagram?
Well, I mean, the main thing that I'm working on is this music series, which I'm also promoting at the same time as the book. So I have a new music series called Singing Earth, which is on the Vivo channel, which is great because you can watch it on your big screen TV through your Roku device, or you can watch it on YouTube, and probably there's lots of places where people can find it. And the first episodes are being finished right now as far as the editing goes. But it's me going around the world and interviewing musicians and talking to them about their process. And then we also usually do some kind of live performance or a recording session. So the first few episodes are me in the Peruvian Amazon with the singing Shipibo shamans, and I'm recording them in the rainforest. And then we're in Brazil, and I'm working with all these really amazing Brazilian musicians in studio sessions. And then there's an episode about the last living Delta blues singer from the original generation of blues singers in the Mississippi Delta. There's a episode about Seattle. There's an episode about the Alaskan Arctic, which includes that sailboat team that I was telling you about, because we sailed to Alaska, and then I go up and work with the indigenous people up there. So I'm going to be working on that all through next year. I've already started writing another book. I don't know when it'll come out, but I've developed kind of a pace for this, and I'll do it as long as I'm able to do it. So,
so you're
and I'm always producing records all the time, but like producing records for somebody.
You're kind of like the Alan Lomax of Seattle indies scene without the shady business practice or confusion.
Right, exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, I went to graduate school to study ethnomusicology, so we studied Alan Lomax. But I'll tell you, one of the most important things you learn when you really study this is you learn an ethics about how you do this. So, for example, anytime I've recorded indigenous people, we always give them the archive, and like, this is yours, it's your intellectual property. Here's an archive of everything recorded, so you remember the stories of your elders. I mean, when I was in Alaska, I was recording stories for Gwich'in elders that were 80 and almost 90 years old. And so now there's an archive of their storytelling for, whatever they want to use it for. And in the Amazon rainforest, the same thing. I've produced albums for these shamans down there, and 100% of the money goes to the shamans. It doesn't go to me. I'm the producer and the creator, and the helper is more what I am. So you learn how to do that. There's kind of a practice that you learn as you do it, but you also learn, all the legal stuff about intellectual property and ownership, and the right and ethical way to do those things. Also, you only do them when you're invited to do them. They invite you to come and do this. So
I'll revise my compliment / label and say you're Lomax meets Peter Gabriel, because if you look at the real world records and what he did with bringing light to world music in a mainstream way, or at least with major distribution, kind of what he did, but all Barrett all the time. And the last question, this is intended to be a compliment. So I look at the master's degree and the Vivo series and the books and all that. It's all smart stuff. Is there anything dumb that you're into? Do you have any hobbies that don't require a high IQ?
I don't think I have a high IQ. I think I just am one of those people. I mean, I have studied, and I went to music school.
Let me rephrase. Do you ever go through YouTube and watch videos of people falling down? Do you like any physical comedy? Do you like anything that's not intellectual?
Yeah, I'm sure I do, but I'll be honest, I don't spend time on YouTube. I know people spend hours on there, and I've just never been pulled into that. I mean, every now and then I'll watch a movie trailer because I want to see the trailer, but I truly am so busy, and I love what I do. I use technology. I mean, I have very high-tech technology when I'm doing field recordings, because I'm running on battery power and doing digital recordings, and you have to have technology to do that. But somebody was saying to me at one of our shows, they're like, you should get a t-shirt that says, how did he say it? Barrett Martin music, make yourself smarterer.
So no energy drinks for you like this.
No, I can't. I'm drinking coffee, I'm old school, black coffee, and just sit at your writing station and write your book, or go into the studio and don't monkey around. Write a great song and record it and put it out. Stop the nonsense. So yeah, there's probably stuff that I've liked that's probably kind of dumb, and I'm not trying to avoid the question. I just can't really think of anything off the top of my head. But I like the idea of music and art and literature and film making people smarter. I like that as a kind of a directional thing that I'm going for. So when I work with people and produce an album for them, or if I'm doing my own album or some collaboration, yeah, I want to make it as smart and cool and interesting as possible. Because unfortunately, the world we live in, mediocrity and averageness sells really well. You know, the stuff you hear on the radio, it's not a secret. It's paid to be on there. You know, payola is still real. That stuff gets on the radio. And so people start to think, oh, that's the highest benchmark is what I'm hearing on the radio. I'm like, no, that's the lowest. It's just, you know, they paid to put it on there, you know.
I think you just came up with your next book title. Averageness sells really well.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, thank you for the decades of great contributions to the arts, to education, et cetera, and really looking forward to whatever is coming next from you and Team Barrett.
Thank you so much. Pleasure speaking with you.
Paltrocast.
Aside from having to talk to media people like myself, is it a good day for you so far?
You know, it's been all right. Yeah, I got a little exercise, went out to the picket lines. You know, we are still striking, us actors, and so good to get out there, not only to stretch the legs, but to, you know, union solidarity.
As an outsider, I keep up on some of the protests. I know that because of Drew Carey, you get free meals at Bob's Big Boy. Have you gotten any of those meals yet?
I mean, come on. If Drew himself, Mr. Price is Right, is giving out the free goods, of course I have. It was what a generous offer, and you know, oddly rare these days, and so really special.
Well, Drew Carey, as much as people want to go, oh, okay, Price is Right, good taste in music. Have you ever been up on that Drew Carey knows indie rock?
That's a complete surprise to me. I did not. Is he people spotting him at shows? What's going on?
I found out about this through knowing the band Fountains of Wayne, that he was friends with them. And
Oh,
then
wow.
I've seen photos of the Strokes, I think, were on set at The Price is Right, just hanging out as guests, or at least my friend who played with the Strokes was. And so, in other words, Drew may have been taking The Price is Right money to do cool things for all the other comics and artists. So thank you to Drew, right?
Absolutely. And you know, I keep thinking I don't think Bob Barker had his fingers on the pulse of the indie rock scene.
No, I remember hearing an interview with Bob Barker that he was a secret wrestling fan. So I guess game show hosts, what I'm getting at is they have hobbies. It just takes a while to figure out what they are.
They have their secrets. We just have to be the ones to dig for them.
But hey, this is not the Bob Barker interview or the Drew Carey
Wait, what?
interview. This is the Joe interview. And can we start off with compliments here?
Do you need? I like your Thin Lizzy shirt. Is that what you were digging? You wanted me to compliment you? Is that what you meant?
No, I'm throwing it at you here. I'm saying when you do a music video like Unless, you have it really, really hard, where musically it has to sound good, comedically it has to be well written and funny, and then visually it has to have a lot to look at too, because music videos, people turn them off when they don't like to look at it for more than 10 seconds.
Sure.
So a lot of pressure, and I think you really executed well on that one.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. As you can tell, we worked really hard on it, and we are very proud of, you know, like you said, the musical content and the comedic content and the look of it.
And so it's cool to see Taylor Garron in that. And you, during lockdown, did a cool interview with Taylor, I think over Instagram. Was that the beginning of the friendship or midway through the friendship?
You know, I got to know Taylor. She, I think, responded to some of my videos that I had put out a few years ago. I did a little, I'm trying to think of the delicate way to put it, a video dump where I released 31 videos in one day.
Yes.
And I believe it was off of that. Taylor was into it, and then she showed up at a show I was doing in New York, and then we got to know each other that way. And like you said, over the lockdown, we had a little chat for Vulture on Instagram, and you know, now she lives in LA, and I was like, now is finally the time to get Taylor into one of these videos.
Copyright dumps or video dumps or whatever you want to call them, they have good results, they have bad results. Like, I love Green Day, but when they put out the 3 albums at the same time, you just go, that's too much Green Day. In your case, I think it aged well with how much you put out in a short period.
Yeah, you know, it was a way to get people to notice, because it's tough online when you put out a sketch video, people are scrolling. When you have to fight with this, when you have to fight with the finger, how easily it can swipe to the next thing, you're fighting the scroll, it's hard. And so that was kind of the tactic of, good luck ignoring me, because I'm going to release 31 videos in one day. It's going to show up and I'm going to wear you down and you're going to watch some of this stuff.
Yes, I hear that. Now, unless, if I can still ask more, I don't know if the contract I had to sign before this interview, if I've exceeded my enough questions or the NDA, but when I hear it as a big music person, when it goes to the chorus, the key of it, I hear Blaze of Glory by John Bon Jovi. Was that a coincidence or an influence?
That is a coincidence. You know, I would not put John or any of the guys in Bon Jovi as an influence, but you know, I am trying to tap into something country. I am trying to tap into that kind of love song type thing. So, you know, perhaps something in the ether was slippery when wet, and then went right into my.
I see what you did there. That was a good reference,
but not directly, not purposefully.
Anytime, if that ever comes up again and you feel a little guilt about that, just go, well, you know, that Blaze of Glory, the guitar part was played by Jeff Beck, and I'm a guitar player, so you have to like Jeff Beck, right? That's
good. I didn't know that. That's good cred, so you can steer away from Bon Jovi, go into two-time Hall of Famer Jeff Beck, R.I.P.
Yeah, and then you can go, and come on, I mean, Richie Sambora, Phil X, I'm a guitar player. This is what I'm into, right?
These are good tips. These are very good tips.
Now, you as a guitar player, where does that all start? Because a lot of times comedians, it was kind of a trope of like, and it would go a little something like this, the bad 80s things, you know, the Jack Nicholson impression, musician with the comedian with a guitar, jugglers. And then now it's totally fine and normal to be a musical comic.
Yeah, you know, I've never because of that cliche you're referring to, I never wanted to be the guy with an acoustic guitar on stage. So my stand-up, you know, typically is not musical, and I stayed away from it for a long time, but I played in bands when I was in high school. You know, I started out playing the violin in the orchestra when I was a wee one, and then transitioned into playing the guitar, and I've always loved it. And you know, like we said, you don't want to be that kind of corny cliche, but I think we're all mature enough now that if the music is good, why not? And it just felt like a kind of a new frontier for me. You know, I'm always trying to look for the next thing that I can, because I don't want to repeat myself. I want to keep moving to the next interesting thing. And it was like, I mean, you can see I've got two guitars behind me right now, and so it was right in front of my face, and it was really exciting to get back into music while still kind of furthering the comedy that I've been doing for years.
Paltrocast.